Would you also like to record it? I think you have that option.
It's telling me it's recording right now.
Yeah, so I'm recording, but I think you can also, I think there's a choice on your, if you look at the bottom.
Record on this
Yeah,
computer. Didn't know that.
there you go. Yeah. Okay. And then we're going to start casting to Zoom, to Facebook. I'm just making sure that it's visible to the public. It seems to default automatically to friends only audience, understandably. It's so interesting. It's usually quiet here, and then as soon as it's time for me to host one of these sessions, then it becomes loud.
Oh,
Noise outside.
I can't hear anything. I think your microphone is cutting out the background sound.
Uh-oh. How about?
I can hear you, but not the noise.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, wonderful. Okay, hello. We are live.
Hello.
Good afternoon, good evening to people who may be watching in Berlin or other parts of the world. My name is Elen Awalom, and this is the sixth and final session of our 4-day conference, Grounded Spirituality and Embodied Communication, Psycho-Spiritual Wisdom in a Time of Crisis. And this session is entitled Discernment and Maturity in Relationships Through Embodiment. And today is Thursday, November 30th, and it is 1:03 p.m. Eastern Time. And I am here with the wonderful, beautiful Magali.
Hello.
Yes, hello. And I'm going to read Magali's bio. Magali helps visionary entrepreneurs, innovative creators, and game changers to unlock their next level through transformative energy work. She burns for creating more happiness, kindness, health, and well-being on a global scale, and her work is her contribution to create the cultural and conscious shift that is needed to achieve this. She has spent the last decade intensively studying and researching consciousness, energy, trauma healing, and development, self-development. She is trained in shiatsu, somatic experiencing, NARM, shamanism, and Reiki. Over time, she has refined her own methodology, which relies on authentic presence, sharp awareness, and a deep acceptance of the manifold expressions of being human. Personally, she has experienced major transformations by confronting herself in silent meditation retreats, isolation, and in the dark. Through these experiences, she has transcended what she thought were her limits and acquainted herself with previously uncharted corners of her soul. As a survivor of trauma, depression, and addiction, she is passionate about sharing the tools that helped her transform her own life. Yeah, welcome, Magali.
Hi, Elen. Thank you so much for having me. So nice to be with you here.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, I actually noticed that I meant to have a glass of water with me. I'm not really thirsty at the moment, but I just want to just bring it into the room that I might need
That's
to
important.
take a break for at some point to grab some water. How are you doing today? I heard there's snow in Berlin.
Yes, so we had just a few past days with people being really joyful about the snow. Actually, it was nice to see. And yeah, like I was telling you, my son was really into the magic of winter, you know.
Yeah. So I noticed a lot of curiosity about your journey. How, first of all, I believe you're of French origin. So I feel curiosity about how you made your way from France to Germany, if you would like to share with us. And then I also feel curious about your journey, both of your own personal healing and of becoming a healer. Would you like to share some of that with us today?
Yes. Um, so I came to Germany. So German was my first foreign language that I learned at school. At the time, I think we were starting to learn languages with 12 years old or something. And it was the first year they wanted to introduce it a year earlier. And it was kind of like a pilot project. And we could choose between English and German. And already I didn't like to do like everyone else because everyone else wanted to do English. And I said, okay, then I will choose German. And I think there was also, you know, like in France, still lots of cliches about Germany and the German language. When I started to learn, people were telling me, why do you want to learn the language of the Nazis
Yeah.
or the Boche, like the French say? And I'm sure, you know, it's still in our genes that this language evokes something particular. But for me, it's also the language of a lot of poets, lots of philosophers that I really like. And at some point, I decided I would like to become a translator because I really love languages and I really love to build bridges between things. And it was coming kind of easily to me. I don't know why. Like everyone was saying German is difficult to learn, but for me, it's always felt like very simple. Like I just have to remember in some way, you know. And so yeah, I started to think to go to Germany when I was 18. And especially to Berlin because you know, the history is very fascinating of this city, and a lot of artists I like also had their Berlin phase, so that was very attractive to me because of that. And the thing is that at that time I had myself quite a complicated life. I hadn't found any healing at that time. I was feeling really suicidal and self-destructive, and I was taking heroin, and you know, it was just very complicated to kind of sort things out, you know, for moving in another country. So I decided to postpone it, and in the end that I had other adventures that brought me in other places, and finally I came back after my divorce of my first marriage, and that's when I settled here.
And how old,
And
if you don't mind me asking, how old were you at that point?
I was 26.
Very young.
Wait a minute, no, I was 28, sorry. Linear time is a bit difficult for me. Sometimes I have to sometimes calculate my age. Like, what year are we in? Okay, so.
Same. Especially, it seems like you lived a life packed with a lot of transformation and stages and growth. And so sometimes it can be even harder to track, you know, when
Yes.
when we've led lives that are a bit outside of the ordinary. So
Yes. Yes. And so that's around the time that actually that my healing journey started. Because before I came to Berlin, I was in New York, and I was in a relationship with someone that was very toxic and abusive. And this made me physically ill. And I see you feel it in your body.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the resonance.
So this was in New York City?
Yes, and so I kind of escaped that relationship. I came back to Europe, and that's when I decided to come to Berlin. And I was a little bit, I stayed with my mother for a few months before to kind of like rebound, and saw some doctors in France, but no one really knew what was going on with me. They were like sending me to one specialist and the other specialist and like bouncing me around. And when I arrived in Berlin, I found more alternative things. And because the mainstream medicine was not able to help me, that I started to research on my own. And I started to have experiences that not only were relieving my symptoms, but also allowed me to discover new states, new possibilities of how I could feel. And I noticed it's reaching things that also no one has been able to help me with before, because when I was younger, I saw psychologists and I did talk therapy, but it was not really changing the way I was feeling. And there I noticed, whoa, that is really interesting.
Yeah.
And I quickly became pregnant, like I think 9 months into arriving in Berlin. It was not planned, but I chose to keep him. And I decided during pregnancy to go on a Vipassana retreat because I thought it's something I wanted to do for a long time. And I thought once the baby is here, who knows when I can take time away like this. That's chance.
Yeah, how many months pregnant were you? But I'm just curious.
I was 8 months pregnant when I
Can
went.
I share a very quick related anecdote? When
Yes.
I went to a Vipassana retreat about almost, I can't believe it's been that long, 4 years ago, it'll be in March. And a woman who was about almost 9 months pregnant was there, and she actually delivered on the last day of the retreat. So I'm like, oh,
Wow.
yeah. So
Amazing.
yeah, so and it was so it was beautiful. But I digress. I want to return to your story.
Yes. Yes, and there also I made experiences that opened up my horizon, you know, because so later I discovered I have developmental trauma, and with that kind of things, when it starts almost at the beginning of life, we don't have anything to compare. Like sometimes, you know, when we experience something very difficult and we are traumatized, we still remember how it was before. But when we were kind of born like this, we don't have anything to compare. So these experiences really showed me, whoa, I could actually feel different. I don't have to have like this background feeling of dread, you know, of heaviness, of even when you are doing things you enjoy, you cannot really reach joy fully. So yeah, when I started to have these experiences, I became even more curious, and I started to research, you know, read all the things I could read and meet different people, meet different meditators, mentors, teachers. And yes, I started also to study shiatsu because I wanted to change careers as I was becoming a mother. I wanted to have more flexibility to be present for my child. And yes, since then, I've just been on that journey of learning, researching, you know, both on my personal healing journey and my experience with my clients. Because for me, every time I have an experience, I ask myself questions, you know, And I look for answers that sometimes bring more questions. But yeah, I think for someone that is as curious as I am, that's why I stayed in that career, because it just never stops. You know, you can always go deeper and research more.
Wow. As I'm listening to you talking about the research that you've done, the work with clients, as well as some of the relationships that you were in that were not very healthy for you, one to the point of becoming physically ill, I notice that I want to go a little bit deeper in that so that we can touch on some of the points for our talk today, which is about like discernment and relationships and trauma too. But I also want to be really mindful of like your boundaries and what you do and don't want to share. Would you like me to ask a particular question, or would you rather just start sharing on the topic?
If you want, I can start to share what happened in that first relationship that made me ill.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was the perfect candidate because I was not aware that actually my relationship with myself was self-hating, and that I had internalized the way my parents were relating to me, and they were both kind of neglectful and controlling. So I really had internalized that I had no value, if I want to keep it short. And so when this person started, so of course it didn't start like this, it didn't start like someone that was critical of me, in actually quite the opposite, you know. But at some point he started to become more and more critical of me and blame me for every time there was a misunderstanding or something was not going right. And because also I was talking not in my native language, I was, and you know, I have no problem taking feedback, you know, in the contrary, I'm always willing to learn. So I was listening to what he was saying, and I was like, well, he must be right. But I didn't realize that actually I was used to blame myself. It was like my internal program to always blame myself for everything and feeling guilty about everything. So in that way, he found we were like two puzzle pieces, you know, matching perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you like to talk about how you were able to develop better discernment, and maybe even what the somatic experience for you is of that discernment, that intuition? I think that's a really critical thing, particularly for people with trauma. It can be hard to distinguish between our intuition and our trauma or our fear, right?
All right, this is such an important point. Yes. I think for me, it was, there was that, and there was another thing that was difficult to distinguish is what am I feeling and what is the other person feeling? Because that's also something that I was almost born with, that my intention was used to be much more focused on other people that I was in relationship with than on myself, and be attuned to their needs so that I can stay in a relationship with them. And so for a long time, I was feeling things. I thought I was extremely emotional, you know, and that was also something my mother would tell me all the time. Don't be so sensitive, you have to toughen up, the world is not like this, you know. And yes, I had a few experiences where actually someone I was working with for years, I worked as a model and met very interesting artists in that way.
Wait,
And one of them,
to stop you for Yeah, I'm like, because that's, that's kind of an unusual career path. So just kind of dropped it on us and kept moving. That's how I feel. Um, is that what you were doing before you began studying shiatsu and before you were pregnant?
So I started to do that when I was 16, actually. And there was a time where I was doing it as a main thing. And I was like also traveling for it. But then there were times where it was like just a side thing. Actually, before I started to study shiatsu, I was working as a costume designer on movies.
So cool.
Yes.
Wow. I honestly, maybe we'll have to chat offline because I'm very curious about these other parts of your life. And actually, we may come back to them because it might be relevant to some of the other things that you've done professionally. On the previous
Mhm.
calls, I had people who were like me, who had been performers, who were musicians, or who were singers, who were actresses, and modeling similarly. There's an aspect of performing. So I would
Mhm.
like to just like put a pin in that and come back to it later. So please continue with your story.
Yes. Um, yes, I'm a bit distracted now because I'm thinking, yes, that creativity is definitely has always been super important to me, and I've always surrounded myself with creative people, musicians, photographers, working on movies I loved because, being in this creative process with other people was just like home, that just felt so good. But yes, so this photographer it was very interesting, his project, because he was working with women, and he discovered, he's from the Netherlands, and he discovered many women he was working with had experienced sexual trauma and often incest, and that they were suffering so much from the secrecy around their stories. And he noticed that these women that were beautiful would not see themselves as beautiful. They could barely look at themselves. And so he really wanted, through his photos of them, to manage to make something where they could find themselves beautiful. And I remember that when I arrived in the Netherlands to work with him, somehow I had been a bit discouraged because at that time I started to be contacted by fashion photographers, which is very different than artistic photographers. And they were making me feel like I'm not pretty enough or I'm not thin enough. And it was a very weird experience because I was like, you saw my portfolio, you make me come, and then you criticize me. But
Yeah.
it instilled some self-doubt, And when I arrived at this place, I was like, so you're not disappointed to see me in real? And he was like, it's weird because somehow I knew you were gonna say something like this. And no, I'm not at all disappointed. And I recognize you. And he told me that he himself is autistic, and he could see already from the photos that I was similar,
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the first person who actually made me aware of my neurodiversity.
Yeah.
And I had more experience with him like this that were like kind of revelations, because we worked together several times. And I remember once we hadn't met for a while, and I arrived at his place and we hugged, and I was feeling joyful. And all of a sudden I felt this tremendous sadness, like almost wanting to cry, but I knew this is not me, I'm not sad. And when we separated, I saw his eyes were full of tears. And that was the first time I noticed I am feeling someone else's feelings, and why it was so obvious, So it took some of these experiences to give me a direction or directions to explore. But of course, what was decisive, I think, was doing these retreats completely alone and in silence, where I could really reach the depth of myself, you know, where I could finally have my attention completely on myself. And from there, I started to really be able to anchor myself in that and be able to have discernment, you know, around what is mine and what is not mine.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the question of the difference between intuition and fear or trauma?
Mm-hmm. I think that sometimes there is confusion between intuition and instinct and trigger. And I've seen that is actually something that abusive people or people from cults use to manipulate and control others. And I think we really, really need to come to this point that I was talking about of like being able to recognize what is mine and what isn't. And is, for example, this feeling of like, whoa, I'm scared right now. Is it coming from my trauma, or is it actually my instinct that is perfectly accurately telling me the situation is dangerous? Because we really need to be able to tell that difference to protect ourselves and to make good choices in relationships. And actually it was, if I can tell a little anecdote that was also very important for me. I think it's 2 or 3 years ago, I visited a community on the outskirts of Berlin. It's one of the pioneer communities in Germany that has set up itself as conscious, ecological, all these things, and are trying to really look at the structure of the community itself to avoid, for example, that people's shadows are taking over or that kind of thing. So they really, really did a lot of work for decades. And I went there for a summer festival. So they had many guests coming from other places that didn't belong to the community. And some of these guests were coming from another community that is also German. And they were trying to introduce what they call Wir-Räume, so we rooms, which is a concept they have developed to allow people to become aware of their shadows in community and integrate them. But what I saw in these rooms was not healing or integrative practice. I saw really gaslighting and manipulation and bullying, and I was really appalled. But I didn't see many people that were trying to counteract this. And at first I was, you know, I just arrived there and I was like, I don't know what's going on. So I continued to observe. And I saw more and more of this. And then at the lunch table, I ended up being at the table with some of these people. They started to attack the person that was next to me. And when they did that, I felt in myself, like in my solar plexus, almost like a fist entering, you know, in my stomach. And I realized that, like, energetically, they were also trespassing people's boundaries. And I tried to talk about it, And I was completely gaslighted. Like when I mentioned like the activation I started to feel after this sensation, one of them told me, it's your ego that is dissolving.
Yeah,
And
of course they did.
I looked around the table with a smile on my face, like this is so ridiculous. And I saw no one reacting. And around this table were people that were much older than me and much more advanced, you know, in this self-work. And for a moment I had doubt, like, why is no one saying anything, you know? But ultimately I kept following my intuition and my instinct, and I just couldn't let go. I was like, these people are doing something really, really wrong. And what came out of this is that I was with my partner at that time who wrote an article about it. And, you know, it was made public that these people were actually a cult. And now the leader is in jail. And unfortunately, there have been more dramatic abuses happening before he ended up in jail. After the article, it took, I think, 2 years. But
Yeah.
at least it was uncovered. And I feel like it's so important, even when we are surrounded by people who we think are more advanced, to have that kind of discernment.
I'm having a reaction to that.
Yeah. Me too. I'm buzzing even just talking about it, because I didn't give you the details of the abuse, but of course they are in my mind, and that was really horrific.
How long were you there?
For this summer festival, it was just like, it was less than a week, because in the end we got kicked out.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Yes.
And when they realize they can't manipulate you, that's usually what happens, right? Because you're a threat to their ability to dominate the others. Usually, I don't know the details of the situation, but usually that's what's true. So something is coming up for me. May I share it with you?
Of course.
So without naming names, there is someone who I guess is a facilitator of sorts. And there are often videos posted on Facebook of him facilitating people. And he seems to really promote this idea about what the feminine is like and what the masculine is like. And that's not inherently troubling, but he advises, I've seen him advising women to physically assault the men that they're romantically involved with in order to get them to behave correctly, stop being harmful, or and I think and I remember I said something about that once. I was on it briefly on a live cast with him, and he tried calling me green, which, you know, in integral and spiral dynamics is like, you know, the postmodern stage. And I know that that's not true of me, but that's something I've seen used a lot by people who are engaged in really heavy spiritual bypassing, who have not actually done their shadow work, but behave as though they have, and behave as though they've transcended these levels. And how, because the thing is that I've watched a number of live streams with this person, and it's very tricky. It's very, very tricky, because part of me is like, maybe there is something true. Maybe I'm something I'm missing. Maybe I'm just not there yet. Maybe I haven't reached that level of spiritual consciousness. But no, once you understand the nervous system and the human body, and that you cannot bypass it, that physical pain is real, that trauma is real, that it repatterns your entire body and your brain, then you can no longer accept these kinds of ideas, because you know that any kind of domination, any kind of physical harm, regardless of the gender of the person that's engaging in it, is usually harmful to the people who are experiencing it, even if they seem to be consenting. Like, even if they seem like it's, oh, we're being playful, she's training me like I'm a dog, you know, so that I stop misbehaving. That's kind of different than, let's say, you know, sometimes there are containers where people choose to do that, but that's different than having a romantic relationship where instead of leaving your partner, he guides you to essentially abuse them so that they learn how to behave, right? So what I'm feeling into is that even for those of us who have done this kind of work, if we have trauma in our past, especially developmental trauma, there can still be parts of us that invalidate our bodily knowing.
Yes, internalized invalidation is one of the things that I had really to excavate.
Yeah.
Like it can be so subtle, and it's like between the layers. And I feel like I've really also needed, you know, I've been lucky to have a few mentors that are really advanced and that were able to be mirrors for the things I was blind to in myself, and receiving shadow work and supervision, like that's really helped me tremendously to address these blind spots. And I must say, I think that was also one thing that really helped me when I was in this situation with these cult people, because they were also based on developmental theory, and they had a hierarchy. Sometimes for French people, some words are really hard to pronounce. And so they were saying that the guru and his assistants, they were so high on the ladder that like the feedback you would give them, it was not useful because you're not there yet, you know, so they wouldn't take any feedback.
Exactly.
But my experience with my mentors was actually that when I would tell them something very spontaneous, you know, not because I was thinking, oh, I'm going to help them with their shadow, but just something I saw, they were actually checking in with themselves. And sometimes they were also telling me, oh, that's so interesting because I was not able to see that before. Thank you. And another difference was that these people were saying, because we are more advanced and we see more than you, you should completely trust us. Yeah. You should give up your own inner authority. And what I experienced from my mentors was not that at all, was that when they're able to see more than me, they're also able to see what I need to see it myself. You know, from a wider perspective, they see where I'm standing and what I need to finally. And I remember these experiences very vividly because I felt in my body when they were pointing to one of these things I was blind to, like a full body reaction, like ching, you know, something that is like, whoa, yeah. This is true.
Yeah. The other thing that comes up for me is that often in spiritual communities, a common form of spiritual bypassing is saying that you are embodying the trickster archetype. So the trickster is someone who triggers others, right? And playfully, like through comedy, but it can also be done in a number of different ways, right? And of course, there is value in every archetype, right? But in my experience, usually these people are embodying the really dark shadow aspects of that archetype, of the trickster archetype, the one that triggers and doesn't care about what happens in the aftermath, right? And then claims authority, right? Claims that they know you better than you know yourself. So yeah. Well, I'm glad that you have the discernment to take care of yourself, and so much so that you are no longer welcome in the community.
Yes, but I think on some level we we all have this discernment, but we just don't trust it. I think it's more about trusting it, trusting our instinct, trusting our intuition. Because what you say about the trickster, for example, I think that actually everyone recognizes when a joke is made from love and with love or without. But because when someone does something that is without love, we feel shame, we feel so activated, we feel powerless, we feel disconnected from our resources. It becomes really hard to then connect with our intuition. So it really needs to be developed, I think, at first maybe outside of the triggering situations, spending lots of time alone or with people who you can trust to give you feedback about what you are not aware of, so that, you become really familiar with it. Mm-hmm. And then when you are in the triggering situation, you are more able to recognize the difference.
Wow. Do you have any advice for people who are listening about how they can practice discernment, especially when they're entering new relationships, whether that's a new friendship, a new person that they've met romantically, a new potential business colleague or collaborator? Do you have any suggestions or words of wisdom?
Mm-hmm. I think it's very important to follow actually the first signs, because what I've noticed is that manipulative and abusive people, they actually use good traits of, like what makes actually a nice person to have a relationship with. Because there's a lot of talk around codependency and your childhood trauma, the trauma bond, and so on and so forth. But what I saw is that, and one of the reasons these people go into spiritual communities is because people are nice to have relationship with. They are open to critical feedback. They are cooperative. They are willing to trust. They are willing to be vulnerable. They are willing to give the benefit of the doubt, to give second chances. And I would say, actually, in the first moments we meet someone, we often already know, there's something. And often we think, oh, but I don't want to be judgmental, or I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I see that there's a confusion between discernment and judgment. Yeah. And if you can develop a better relationship with those thoughts that you think are judgmental, and look what is behind them, maybe that there is a good intention in them. Maybe that's when you can actually connect with your discernment.
I'm just going to pause for a second because there's something coming up for me as we're talking about. Because I think, at least I'll speak for myself, having seen different therapists and practitioners over the years, they gave me a lot of different, sometimes conflicting advice, right? So there were some people who essentially were guiding me away from my intuition and my bodily knowledge. And they would try to say that I was too rigid. But when I would take their advice, the situations would end in catastrophe. It would really be really bad for my mental, emotional, and physical health, right? And so I think there's still some of that programming in my body that's like, maybe I'm being rigid. Maybe maybe I'm being too severe in my standards for what a partner, a romantic partner has to be, or a business partner has to be. And it's like, no, actually, for me, what I've learned is the securely attached thing to do is to just trust my body, trust my intuition, trust that wisdom. And in some situations, I may want to double check with other people, but mostly that's it. I just need to trust myself. I don't really need to get it validated or check in with other people. Like at this point, I've learned enough. I've done enough therapy. I've done enough healing. I've done enough plant medicine to know
Yes.
the difference between when I'm acting from a place of fear and when I'm, because of my neurodivergence, similar to yours, I'm really good at spotting patterns. I mean, almost within a matter of like 30 seconds or less. Like,
Yes.
I remember I dated someone in the spring, a really sweet man. But I could tell within about I could tell in about the first 10 minutes of our first date that he likely had a predominantly dismissive avoidant attachment style. I could see that he was very warm, very sincere. I could see all of his wonderful characteristics, and I could also already track the places where he was still closed off and self-protective. And on our second date, he confirmed it. I didn't have to ask him. This was a green flag. He said, so you're aware I'm a self-aware, dismissive avoidant. I've been in therapy for 15 years off and on, and I'm still healing. I'm not healed. I'm not perfect, but I catch myself. And if you tell me, then I will take responsibility and accountability. And it was true. Even though the relationship didn't work out, it was wonderful. And it was very important for my ability to be even more self-validating. That what I am observing, that I observe things very quickly, and that two, that what I'm observing is usually correct. Not always, right? But usually correct. So yeah, for me, that's been my work around discernment, has been just trusting the discernment more. Not necessarily developing it, but trusting it when I experience it.
Yes. Yes. And I think another aspect that is important to make good choices in relationship is to actually know what we need in relationships, you know, and what are the thing we want to receive and the thing we are not willing to compromise with. Where is the limit? And I think to really know that, we need to do this inner work for quite a while. That's when I think the childhood trauma healing and shadow work is really necessary.
Absolutely. And I will say, like with this guy, even when we were messaging, I could tell there were like a lot of delayed responses. Like it almost seemed like he was intentionally waiting 24 hours before he would message, reply to each message. And I remember thinking, I wonder if that's deliberate, and I wonder if that is a strategy used to keep me at a distance. And of course, later on, that was true, right? So it's also, even for those of us who have not done a lot of healing work, it's one, paying attention to what's happening, like really close attention, especially in the beginning. And then two, it's also noticing how we're feeling. So if we're feeling like, oh, this is a little off, or I remember, I'll give another example from my dating life. I remember back in, I want to say at least almost a year ago, I was messaging with a guy on a dating app, I think it was Hinge. And I noticed about 2 or 3 times that he said he was going to get back to me at a certain time. He's like, oh, I'll message you when I get home this evening. And it never happened. And then he would message me the next day, not even the next morning, like nothing had happened. So he wouldn't apologize or explain. And I remember feeling bothered by this, because I was like, oh, already this is, and I posted it in a group of women. I won't name the group, but a group of women. And I said, hey, I'm noticing here's like this thread that I had with this guy. And the majority of the women were like, you are so entitled. He doesn't even know you. He's never met you. How dare you expect him to be responsive? And they were really like, screaming me down. And there were maybe and that was there were at least maybe a dozen women that did that. And then there were maybe, I would say like 5 or 6 who agreed with me. They were like, no, from the beginning, if someone says they're going to do something and they're not able to do it, there needs to be some kind of repair. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but it's, oh, you know what? I was working really late last night, or, oh, I was, whatever it might be. And there's not high expectations in the beginning stages of getting to know someone, but also especially for those who have a history of trauma, it's important to pay very close attention and really slow down and feel your emotions. And it doesn't matter what other people say. That was like that experience really for me, because again, in my opinion, the majority of people in our world have unhealed trauma. So the advice that they're going to give you is from that place, even if they're not trying to be harmful. You know, it could
Yes,
be
for
because
sure.
they do those things themselves or they tolerate that in their relationships. So it could be triggering for them when you say, hey, this seems weird, right?
For sure. And I think there's a difference between expectations and standards. You know, it's not because you are noticing a pattern and you don't like it that you actually have the expectation for this person to be different. But it's important to notice it, to make a choice for yourself. Do I want to give access to myself in these conditions? Maybe not, you know. And actually having expectations would be like, okay, I really want this person and I want them to be different and I want to push an agenda on them. This is very different.
Yeah. So we have about, it's depending on if you want to end at 2 p.m. Eastern, we have about 9 minutes left.
Oh,
And
that was fast.
yeah, we can we can go up to 2 hours, depending on whatever you would like. And I really want to make sure that we get some time to talk about your practice, the work you're doing, and your offerings. So people who are listening or watching will know. Is there anything you would like to inform us about with regards to the work that you're doing?
Sure. So at the moment, I have mostly one-on-one work with people. I haven't really recovered from COVID because during COVID I stopped doing group work, and it's more organization when you want to do group work. You have to synchronize everyone at the same time. So also because last year I had very little bandwidth, I didn't want to add that for myself to the logistics of that. But I also love to do group work and I want to start again probably next year. But so at the moment, the one-on-ones I am offering, it's like a 3-month program where we meet weekly, and I give people also tools, practices that they can do on their own, because I see that sometimes when people come for healing, and this was also my experience, that's how I learned this, they are not being explained enough and empowered to learn to do this with themselves. And they become dependent on the practitioner or the facilitator. And they don't feel like they can do it themselves. So my program is also teaching people how to do this with themselves. So yeah, it's a lot of self-responsibility. I think that is a key to healing and transformation. And most people I work with, they often, you know, have a project or a vision for society, to change society, to address the big challenges that we are going through. You know, it can be climate change, it can be violence, it can be lack of diversity or inclusivity or accessibility. And what I'm seeing is that many of these people, they never really managed to fit in the old ways, the exploitative ways, oppressive ways of society. And in some way, there's often still a part of themselves that is having this relationship with themselves. They try to exploit themselves into doing what they need to do. And because of that, their impact is limited. And often, you know, they burn out or They don't see the results they want. They don't have the resources that they need. And my work is kind of like helping them to become themselves regenerative, to source within themselves, and to allow themselves also to have access to the collective resources. And so that they can actually birth their projects, because I think that this new form of leadership is so needed. Also, not only the project themselves, but the way people embody their talk, you know, they're walking their talk. Mm-hmm. I often give an example to people that, you know, you can have great ideas and a beautiful vision, but if you don't address your shadows and what you are not aware of, what you are creating, the fruits, they are going to carry these seeds too. And we saw it, for example, with communism. Okay, let's share everything and be all equal. But if the leaders are actually, and I don't think they were so unaware of it, but greedy for resources and power, that's how it's going to look like in the end. So it's very important to address this if we want to see the results we are actually dreaming of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And where can people find you online?
So I have, I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I have my website, momoko-healing.com and momoko-upgrade.com. So Momoko Healing is more like the general website, and Momoko Upgrade is more for entrepreneurs and people who carry projects.
Yeah, and Momoko is MOMOKO dash healing, HEALING dot. And then I think I heard you say www.momoko-upgrade.com. Okay, wonderful. And then I think on social media you're under Magali Chas, or Chas.
Yes.
So not your full last name, so people are aware. So it's CHAS.
Yes, well, I wanted to avoid data collection
by
Meta. Even before it was Meta, when it was only Facebook, I was very suspicious already. So that's why I don't give my real name.
Beautiful. So we have about 2 minutes left here before we close out my week-long, 4-day-long series conference. And I just want to say thank you again for joining and hanging out with me. Are there any other really salient points? Because like I said, if you want, I'm happy to continue. If you feel like there's more that you'd like to share with the audience, please let me know.
I watched some of the other talks. I still need to catch up with the replays of 2, but I really enjoyed also the other talks that were, I don't know, I like the aliveness that was in these talks. Was so refreshing to me, you know. Often I feel like on social media, there is a bit of dissonance for me, you know, between what's presented to me and what I'm feeling actually. And it kind of gives me, makes me tired kind of, you know. And I really appreciated in these talks that there was so much aliveness and movement happening. So yeah, I wanted to share that with you. Thank you for holding that kind of space.
Thank you so much. You know, I had someone tell me a little while ago that they couldn't feel me when they were, and like, I think they were implying that I was kind of robotic. And I remember thinking, are they really with me? Because that's not how I think of myself. So again, the first thing is to validate ourselves, to know that that doesn't seem true. But the second is also, it is important to hear from other people that no, we experience you as being very alive and very authentic. So that was part of my goal for this series. You know, I do plan to do something bigger, but it would be with more planning, more advanced notice, more marketing to increase our reach. But I had such a lovely time organizing it and collaborating with you and the other participants. And I really hope that people derive a lot of joy and value from watching the series. And thank you again for your kind comments and for watching the replays. And Magali and Elen, and we are out. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, your snowy evening in Berlin. And yeah.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.